thinking, all right, I've had ideas, like I've thought about this, and yeah, a lot of what you said is, well, kind of common sense, and hopefully there were some insights in there. But you may be thinking, yeah, this is something you can do, and I agree with that. It is something you can do. But there's still the big question of how. How do I do it successfully? And look, don't let me oversell this either, right? They say about 150,000 people graduate with graduate and advanced degrees in business-related fields, yet companies have a 90% failure rate, right? So what's that tell you? There isn't a answer to how do we do this. But first of all, I don't think that 90% statistic applies to the cybersecurity space. And secondly, it also is not as daunting as it may sound or seem. And so let me share some, I think, really kind of intimate insights into how Preventure, the first company I started, was actually started. So I was a forensic investigator, not a manager, not a director. I had pretty much zero executive experience whatsoever up to this point in my career. I was an investigator, and I was just pretty decent at what I did. And I worked for an enterprise, and we had a project where we needed to audit all the systems in the organization. And we were trying to accomplish two things at once. We were trying to identify where all the sensitive data and PII was throughout the entire organization. And we wanted to kind of do a proactive IR, or incident response, if you will. We wanted to kind of proactively assess all these systems we were looking at simultaneously. So of course, at scale, there was like 30, if I remember right, close to 30,000 systems there. And we needed a lot of automation to accomplish that. So we went out and we brought in all these different vendors to see who could solve this problem best for us. And what we found was none of them could. And so I started working on something to solve that problem for us. And it was basically, really is a bunch of scripts that we developed that audited systems, harvested a bunch of information, pulled it back, and we analyzed it centrally. So once we accomplished this and we finished that audit project, we started sharing the results of that work with our peer organizations, enterprises in the same space as us. And some of our peer organizations asked if they could use the system we had put together, and of course we shared it. And then I started getting more requests, people asking for actual support and development and kind of a roadmap on this thing. And the CIO for the organization I was working for actually encouraged me. He kept pointing out, look, Gary, there's an interest in this. Why don't you go do this full time? And so after some prodding for a little while, that's what happened. I took the absolutely terrifying step of leaving a paycheck behind. I took a mortgage on the house, and that was the money that I was going to use to survive and hopefully bring in some help. And I had plans we were going to be making sales within a year. It was going to be fine. And so I'm going into this no executive experience whatsoever. In fact, there's an enormous amount of redevelopment we had to do. I mentioned this thing was basically, a bunch of scripts in its first incarnation, but we needed to develop this to be, enterprise ready and enterprise scale. And I had actually never even been a developer before, or even taken classes on it. So I learned pretty much to develop that system. In many ways, I learned while we were developing that system. I was very fortunate enough to have met somebody earlier in my career who joined me as a co-founder, a very talented engineer who also was a very talented teacher. So he spent a lot of time, teaching me to become a better developer simultaneously. And we went out and we did this. So what's interesting about that story is, first of all, not only that we did it, but it worked, right? Like I had mentioned earlier about doing this in the Baltimore, D.C. region, but ultimately, before NetWitness acquired us, our largest deployment base was a network of about 40,000 systems. We had over 40,000 endpoints that we were distributed across, and largest company, it was a multinational, multi-billion-dollar organization. And it was just us, and it was us that did that, right? And so the interesting thing about that story is Preventure ended up unknowingly following a template that I've seen work very well, not just for Preventure, but every time I've seen this sort of genesis story of companies, it tends to work out pretty well. And what that that template is you may be just an investigator or an analyst or a red teamer, or you are just somebody who's good at what you do, and you can solve problems, and you do solve problems. You identify where there are gaps, and you figure out how to address those. And so you do that, and create some solution to a problem, and then you start seeing through peer organizations that there's validation of that idea, that there are other organizations that are interested in that. And there's a number of companies out there that have started this way. A number of people I've met over my career here, very similar story. And then they go out and they develop, many times they redevelop that solution to be more enterprise scale.